And maybe the best you can do, and that's Leonard Cohen, the poet, said, there's no decent place to stand in a massacre. You may have already compromised yourself to the point where in that situation, the best you can do is a lie. But that means that you shouldn't have bloody well been there to begin with.
And the antidote in many respects is honesty further upstream, honesty with yourself and others further upstream.
You can get yourself in positions where all of your options are bad. And what that means is exactly as you pointed out, you did something upstream, man. Now, one of the things you do in therapy is you find out what people did upstream. You know, and you'll find this in your discussions with your wife. There'll be a problem. And as you circle towards it, you'll see, oh, this is where I made a mistake, right? This is what's wrong with me. And then you can even find out, if you look, you can go back into your past and you can think, oh yeah, that's when I made that decision. I knew when I made it, it was a bad decision, you know? And your life is full of the consequences of decisions you took in the past that put you on the wrong path. And you said, we were talking about repairing things. What you do is you go back to where you made the mistake. You figure out what the mistake was. You know, there's this cartoon trope that there's an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. Well, you come to a crossroad. That's also where you meet the devil. You go this way or that way. If you go the wrong direction, your life will be then the consequences of that bad choice. And then that will tangle you up. And then you'll suffer for it. Then you have to figure out, okay, what's the suffering? What's the problem? When did I make the bad choice? Which road should have I taken? That's how you fix a trauma. You replace the road you did take with the road you should have taken. And now you have a road forward. And once you have a road forward, the trauma is no longer traumatic because you have a road. Your brain brings up the past because you have not specified the proper road forward. You go back into the road you took that was the wrong road. You find out what the right road was. Now you've atoned, you've confessed, you've repented, and you have specified the proper pathway forward. And that's what you do when you negotiate a solution to a problem with your wife too. Here's what we're doing. Here's the problem. Here's what we did wrong. Here's what we'll try to do in the future. And if that new future map works, that past trauma will be rendered irrelevant.
As you know, because I've been sent thousands of messages, these conversation cards sell out exceptionally quick. So here's the deal I'm going to make with you. If you join the waiting list, which is in the description below, you will get sent access to buy these conversation cards 1 hour before anybody else. They're in limited supply, so if you really do want to get your hands on them, please do add your name to the waiting list in the description below. And you can find that waiting list at theconversationcards.com, but I'll also include it in the description below wherever you're listening to this episode. How much do you really know about your health? For me, that answer was simple. The answer was very little until Whoop came along. As you guys know, they sponsor this podcast. But even before then, Whoop was integral for me to know what's going on inside my body. Most of my friends, my family, and my team now use Whoop, but I still have a few friends that are on the fence about getting on board. And what I hear from some of those friends is that they're a little bit worried about what they might see in the data, and they might feel uncomfortable about knowing what's going on inside their body. If I've learned anything, it is that knowledge is power. And once I finally started to look at the data and understand how getting less sleep was affecting my body and how my old lifestyle was actually hurting my long-term health, everything changed for the better. So if this is something that you'd like to try out, head over to join.whoop.com/CEO and you'll get to try Whoop for 30 days, risk-free, with zero commitment. Try it and let me know how you get on. I was looking at our past conversation and I thought it would be interesting to see who the audience were, their demographic. And the age group were 20 to 40-year-olds, really 18 to 40-year-olds. My question to you is, in their lives, in that demographic's lives, what do you think the biggest challenge is? Because both your kids, Julian and Michaela, both fit into that category as well. What is the greatest challenge that demographic face?
Well, the biggest challenges we had with our kids was, I think the biggest challenge I had in my generation was negotiating the years between 13 and 15, something like that. But my sense is now the biggest challenge to young people is negotiating the transition into adulthood identity. And I think that's partly why we have this terrible war in our culture about what constitutes identity. And I think the reason that identity has become such a problem is that our concepts of identity are unbelievably unsophisticated, narrow, hedonistic, and self-serving. So the identity groups that have popped up are all, you could say, whim-based identity groups. They're sexual identity, say, or something arbitrary like sex or race or ethnicity, something arbitrary. But the sexual identity groups are particularly interesting because the idea that that's your identity is predicated on the notion that there isn't anything more vital to you than the immediacy of your sexual behavior. Well, you're not a sex machine. You're not a short-term sex machine. That's not what a human being is. So if you revert to that, all you're going to do is produce like anxiety, hopelessness, and misery. It's not a good solution. So then you might say, well, what's the solution? And the solution is something called a subsidiary solution. It's like, so what's your identity? Well, you should get your act together and take care of yourself. So you have to integrate yourself. You have to integrate across anxiety and hatred and pain and jealousy and fear and hunger and lust and all that plethora of spirits that wage war within you.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. You have to bring that into a unity, okay? And one of the things Nietzsche said, the famous German philosopher, was that every drive attempts to philosophize in its spirit. So all those subordinate spirits that war inside you will try to dominate. I'm only my anger or rage. That's the protester type, you know. I'm only my sexuality. I'm only my appetite. That's the consumer model. But all that has to be integrated. And then you might say, well, integrated into what? Well, integrated into a structure that serves all of those spirits simultaneously and harmoniously across a long time. That's maturity. Okay, but that doesn't happen in isolation. So then there's stages above that. Okay, so the next thing is maybe you've got your act together enough so that someone can tolerate being around you. So there's enough left over from you so you can play with someone else. So you establish a relationship, marriage, let's say. You invite someone else to join forces with you. You produce a united vision. Okay, so now there's you and there's you as husband. And it's the joint interplay of those that's now your identity. Okay, and so now you have a role and you have obligations and responsibilities and opportunities. You know, you say, well, I'm constrained by my marriage. You know, there's all sorts of things I can't do, which really means I can no longer, in the most primitive way, it means I can no longer immediately gratify my short-term whims. Although it could also be more complex in that I don't get to pursue the things that I need to pursue, which means you haven't negotiated with your wife very well. Like if your marriage is a prison, you're either very immature in what you want or you haven't negotiated properly. If you've done it well, you've got your individual unity established, and then there's a unity within the marriage that's better. And why would it be better? Well, you could learn to love someone, and that would be better because getting outside yourself decreases your anxiety. So we know as psychologists, one of the things that was learned 20 years ago is that there's no difference between thinking about yourself and what you want and being miserable. Those are self-consciousness and negative emotion are so tightly tied together that they're statistically indistinguishable.
Does that not raise the question about the decline of religion?
Absolutely. Well, that's the next level. It's like, okay, so there's you, now you're a husband, right? And so your identity is those two things in lockstep. But that's not enough. Now maybe you're a father. Now you have kids. Now you have a whole nother level of responsibility and opportunity to flesh yourself out and support and love, right? So now, and then, well, you've got your family together. That's not enough. You've got the community to serve. So you want to serve the community, and then communities scale. You know, maybe you're good in your local business and you have a local business organization and you're good in that. And then, well, then there's the town level and the city level and the state level and the country level. And then, you know, America is one nation under God. That's the ultimate level of this hierarchy of identity. And that's what should be served most fundamentally. That's a definition, okay? God is that which should be served most fundamentally. It's a definition. So when you're thinking that B is better than A, what you're saying, even if you don't know it, is that B is a step from A on the road to God. That's what you're saying. The medieval definition of God was something like the sum of all that is good, or the essence of what is good. And so if you believe that there is a good, then lurking behind that is the spirit of all of that which is good. That's God by definition. Now, you can debate forever about what that is, but it is something you live in relationship to. Like that's absolutely inescapable.